Welcome back, adventurers. This is the third video in the series. We would have loved to hear all your stories of what you got up to outside in the last video, but we hope that you've been able to share some of those stories with at least one other person, or if not, maybe journaled or noted things down, because often nature uncovers lots of things for us to discover, and sometimes not always the things that we think it might. Of course, do feel free to share any of your stories or any kind of wow moments of wonder and awe in the comment section below, because we'd love to hear them. In this video, we're going to explore now what forest school actually is. So we're going to look at the definition and principles of it. So the activities you were doing in the last video weren't really what I would describe as a forest school experience. So what they were a range of nature connection and sensory or observational activities that I'd picked for you because I thought it would give you a good grounding in the space and help you start to explore and trigger some curiosity in the world around you. So what you did wasn't actually really a forest school experience, but hopefully started that process off. So there is a whole world of outdoor learning out there, and forest school is just one particular approach in the world of outdoor learning. There's all sorts of things out there like environmental education, adventurous activities, horticulture and growing, bushcraft, earth education, curriculum-based outdoor learning. So there's a whole spectrum of different ways of working with people. So forest school is just one of those approaches. So each type of outdoor learning has a different aim and objective. So for example, environmental education is designed to help people understand about environmental issues and hopefully how to look after the environment, and live more sustainably. Things like bushcraft are about outdoor living skills, like how to recognise edible plants, how to light yourself a fire, find water, build shelter, that kind of thing. Curriculum-based outdoor learning, of course, could be for any lesson outside. You could do a literacy lesson outside, a maths lesson outside, so it would have curriculum outcomes. So all types of outdoor learning are valuable, but they have different aims and therefore different outcomes. Forest school is very good at doing what it's designed to do, which is to build self-esteem, confidence and emotional resilience, as well as kind of the whole holistic development of a person. It's very much a holistic approach. So all of these approaches are really valuable. No one is better than the other. So forest school, we're not saying forest school is any better than any other type of outdoor learning, because it's not. It's very, very good at doing what it's designed to do. But then bushcraft's very good at doing what it's designed to do. Environmental education is good at doing what it's designed to do. So it's about picking the right approach for what you want to achieve. If you're interested in the wider world of outdoor learning and you want to know more about this and a bit more about some of the approaches, then I have made a video about this in more depth, so I'll pop the link in the description below. So what is forest school? In my experience, it's actually quite a tricky thing to explain. It's a very subtle way of working with people, and sometimes when people observe it, they might miss what's going on behind the scenes or below the surface because of its subtleties. In fact, I think I didn't really understand it until I started running it. And even now, as an experienced practitioner, there's still things that come to light every time I run a forest school session. So I think it's something that you continue to learn about and new things come to light. There are also a lot of misconceptions out there about what forest school is or isn't, and I don't blame people for these misconceptions because it's a bit of a weirdly titled thing, forest school, but actually you don't really necessarily need a forest and it's nothing to do with school. So I can understand why there's some confusion out there. But some of the myths you may have come across are things like, oh, forest school's a badge for your school to get, like eco schools or healthy schools. It's not a badge. Or forest school is a place that you go to a forest school. Nope, sorry, that one's not true either. Forest school is a philosophy, it's a way of working, it's a pedagogy. Or you might have also heard forest school is like an outdoor curriculum that you follow, and in week 1 we do tree ID, in week 2 we learn how to light fire. Nope, sorry, it's not that either. Forest school is very learner centred and play based, so it's not an outdoor curriculum. So what is it? A 10-year-old I used to work with once said, forest school is a feeling you just can't put into words. So maybe she's right, but I'm going to try to explain it to you. So to me, forest school is a humanistic approach. It's a way of working with people in nature over time throughout the seasons repeatedly. So we would come back to the woods again and again. Ideally it takes place in a woodland, but not necessarily. It could happen in any natural space. Skilled practitioners carefully facilitate experiences so that they are learner centred. They're based around the individuals that are coming to that particular forest school, and it's rooted in the relationships, that they're unconditional relationships. It's rooted in play, and it's rooted in risk taking as well. And through these experiences, it empowers people. It can be very transformative to people as it builds their confidence, their self-esteem, their emotional resilience, but it does also help people develop holistically as people. So it's got a real balance of benefits to people of taking part. And so because of this, it is inclusive of all ages, all abilities, anybody, anywhere, I think can benefit from a forest school because it is person-centred. So it can be run with anyone, no matter where you're from or what your background is. So that's how I describe it. You might hear it being described differently elsewhere. There is a formally agreed definition that I've kind of elaborated on in this one, which you'll be able to find on the Forest School Association's website, which is the UK charity for forest school. But as well as having a definition, there are 6 agreed principles that make up a forest school experience. So I've used one word for each of the 6 things to kind of simplify them. So basically there is time, there's space, there's the learners, there's the leaders, there's risk, and there's growth. So those are the 6 elements that make up forest school. So let's go through each of those in turn. So first, time. So forest school is a long-term process, and that means that groups will come back week after week after week after week. Ideally, groups would come once a week for a full year. So they would come and visit their natural space. And this is important because it's through repetition that relationships are formed, both relationships with the woodland, but also relationships between people and between the learners and the leaders. And you need relationships, a solid relationship, to do any of the emotional work. Then there's the space. So an outdoor natural space, and ideally groups would visit the same space week after week after week. As I said, ideally it would be a woodland, but not necessarily. It could take place in parkland, in more formal gardens, in the corner of the school grounds, perhaps. Any outdoor space will work. Sometimes you have to be a bit more creative if you're in a more limited, tidier space, like some practitioners have to bring in sticks and poles and leaves and things into their school grounds to help the children be able to have a wilder experience. But any space will work outdoors. Wilder spaces do have the most benefits, and there's been a lot of research recently into things like ecotherapies, and we're starting to see that being more widely recognised as a way of working with people, perhaps in a therapeutic sense. So we're seeing things like forest bathing and mindfulness in nature, and that's because I guess, well, at the most deep level, it's because humans are designed to be out here. You know, for tens of thousands of years, we lived out in nature. It's only the last couple of hundred years that we've come indoors. So our whole nervous system is designed to be out here in nature, and we remember it at a deep evolutionary level. So there's lots of benefits to our minds and our bodies out here. It lowers stress chemicals in the brain. It releases endorphins and happier chemicals out here. It's just a very healthy space for humans to be in. Then there's the learners. So Forest School is learner-centred and play-based. So this principle is about recognising that we're steered by the individuals in the group. So as Forest School leaders, we carefully observe learners and we see where they might like to take things next, and we'll follow their interests. So we don't plan, you know, like a whole term's worth of Forest School work, because we don't know where we're going to end up. It very much depends on what the learners want to do or where they might take us. So it's very similar to early years planning, and Forest School has come from Scandinavian early years practice. So if you're working within early years, perhaps that method is much more familiar to you. It tends to, it's certainly in this country, tend to be less familiar to people working with older age groups. Then there's the leaders. So there is a qualification associated with Forest School, and the level 3 qualification is the leadership qualification. So that's the level that you need to be setting up and running Forest School programs. So that training will cover everything that you need to know to kind of get up and running with Forest School. But every Forest School leader will also naturally have a different style. They will also have different competencies and skill sets, things that they enjoy doing and things that perhaps they're less experienced in. So that's important to recognise as well, because the leader always brings a unique quality to the Forest School programme. Then there's risk. So Forest School gives learners the opportunity to take supported risks. So this is all about appropriate levels of risk, balancing the benefits of risk, not just the consequences. So this means holistic risks as well. So not just the physical risk taking, but perhaps also the social and emotional risk taking as well. Then there's what I call growth, which is Forest School supports holistic development, and it also promotes self-esteem, confidence, independence and resilience. So this is about recognising that being out here in nature can support the growth and development of all parts of a person. And it's recognising that there's no hierarchy of importance to these areas. So for example, a person's spiritual development is just as important as somebody's cognitive abilities, and that's just as important as somebody's physical abilities, and that's just as important as to somebody's emotional development. So all of these areas are equally important and nurtured at Forest School. And we also recognise that if one of these areas, for whatever reason, are lacking or hasn't been supported sufficiently, then that will have a knock-on effect to all other areas, because they're all connected. You can't separate them out from one another. So being out here repeatedly with skilled practitioners is going to support the growth of us as human beings, and to use a phrase from humanistic psychology, hopefully will help us self-actualise or become the best person we can be. These 6 elements overlap and intermingle to create the Forest School experience. So therefore every Forest School will be different and unique, because every Forest School has different learners in. It might be in different sites, might be different leaders. No 2 Forest School programs are ever the same. It's that unique combination of these 6 factors overlapping that creates the Forest School experience. So now I'd like to invite you to reflect on each of these 6 principles through your own felt experiences. So I'm going to try and facilitate this through asking you some questions, and we're going to take each of those 6 elements in turn. So first of all, time. Now, thinking back to the play memories that you thought about in the first video, Was there a place that you would go to repeatedly, time and time again? Was there an outdoor space that you regularly visited? Or from the experiences from the last video, that space that you visited to do the activities, how do you think the relationship would develop with the space if you went back there time and time again every week for a year, for example? So maybe just jot down a few thoughts or discuss with a friend some of those thoughts. Then thinking about space. So after the activities yesterday, the sit spot and the sensory mindfulness activities, I asked you to particularly reflect on how you felt in that space. So thinking about, how does being in nature make you feel? Then there's the learner, so in this case yourself. So in those activities in the last video, what did you notice that drew your curiosity? Did you feel moved to do anything in particular? Or was there something you got excited about or something you found fun? Did you follow those curiosities? Did you become learner-centered? Did you follow them? Are there still things that you would like to explore some more about, perhaps, in the future? Also, think about your own play memories. What sorts of things used to spark your interest? What sorts of activities or games did you like to play? Then there's the leader. So at the end of the activities in the last video, I asked you what you might need to follow those curiosities. So were there any resources or any skill sets that you could have benefited from in order to follow your curiosity more fully? How do you think your experiences in the last video would have differed if there was a trained practitioner out there with you helping to facilitate your play? Then there's risk. At the end of the last video, I asked you whether you encountered any challenges when you were out there. And this could be challenge in all senses of the word: physical challenge, mental challenge, emotional challenge, any type of challenge. And so did you encounter any? If so, how did it feel to start taking those risks and challenges? Also, how does the environment out here lend itself to being able to support people to take risks and challenge? Then there's growth. So at the end of the last video, I asked you what you discovered about yourself during your time out there. So did you notice any development in any areas of yourself? So again, thinking holistically. So did you develop any physical skills whilst you were out there? Or did any questions arise and stimulate your cognitive understanding of the world? Or perhaps you tried something and it didn't work the first time and you had to persevere and try again, so you were developing emotional resilience perhaps whilst you were out there. So think about what you did and how that kind of affected you and whether there was any growth or development to you. Also think about, how does this environment out here in nature lend itself to being able to develop those skills holistically too. Once you've jotted down some of your thoughts on this, maybe you'd like to discuss them with another person, a friend, a colleague, and explore whether there are any patterns or similarities in your thinking. So, we've looked at the 6 Forest School principles, but what I've noticed in the past is that sometimes it can be difficult to actually get a feel for what that looks like in practice. So what do those 6 elements mean when it's a group of people out in a natural space? So to help you with this, what I would really recommend is, if it's possible, to try and observe a Forest School session in real life. So maybe you might know schools or organisations that might be running Forest School programmes, and maybe you could get in touch with them and ask if you could observe a session. Most Forest School leaders are quite used to observers coming and may well be very happy to accommodate you. They're usually very friendly. If that's not possible, an alternative would be to take a look at some videos of Forest School in action. There are a variety of videos out on YouTube, so I've put some links in the description below that might be a starting point for you. So maybe go and observe a session and see whether it helps put those 6 elements into real life for you. After observing the Forest School session, I recommend doing a little reflective exercise. So, as I said, there are a lot of misconceptions out there about what Forest School is, and so it is possible that a school or organisation might be calling something Forest School when in fact they're doing something different, another type of outdoor learning. So, as I said at the beginning of the video, there's nothing wrong with any type of outdoor learning. In fact, all outdoor learning is hugely valuable. It's just not all the same thing, so it's not all Forest School. So Forest School is only if it meets those 6 criteria. So what I recommend doing is think about the practice that you've observed, whether or not it was in real life or on video, and see, are all of those 6 elements represented in what you've seen? Are all 6 principles there? If not, which ones are missing? And what does that mean in terms of the outcomes of the experience? If you'd like to explore Forest School definition and principles in more depth, then I have made a more comprehensive video on this subject. I'll put the link in the description below. You also might like to check out the Forest School Association's website. So the Forest School Association is the UK charity which is advocating quality forest school for all. And so on that website there's lots of information about the principles. They've also made various videos explaining Forest School ethos and the principles. So that's a good place to start. The Forest School Association has also got a scheme that organisations can be recognised as Forest School providers, and in order to do that they have to show how their practice is meeting the 6 principles. So they've got a map on their website of organisations that meet those criteria. So that's another place that you can go to see who's running Forest School as opposed to another type of outdoor learning. So we've reached the end of this video, the 3rd one in the series exploring what Forest School is. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.